Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome. Hi. Hi, Dr. Blair. I'm sharing my screen and also looking at my other computer to see the recording. So I'm going back and forth. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. Good to see you this morning.
Good. Has everything gone okay so far?
Yes, wonderful, wonderful.
Okay.
They
Well,
even had a
good.
little break, so that's good.
Perfect. Well, I have everything ready. I hope all the technology works as it's supposed to. I have faith.
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes it works out, but
Yes.
welcome everyone. As you're coming in, you see some directions there for you to enter into the chat box, please. You can please respond to all of those.
Dr. Rodriguez, thank you so much for offering this series of sessions. I really appreciate it. I know the students appreciate it, and they're going to gain so much in this series of sessions. So thank you for doing this. I know it took a lot of time and a lot of work, and so we're just really grateful that you are supporting students in that way.
Thank you, Dr. Blair. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I'm super excited to have the series prepared, and yes, I'm pulling a lot of things together and I'm excited to share it all with everybody. So thanks for having me, and thank you for all your work on these opportunities for our students.
Well, thank you.
So everybody, as you're coming in, I'm watching the time. I just want to give you all a couple of minutes to please respond in the chat box to each of those questions that you see on the screen. Because there are quite a few of us, you know, I'm not able to help with individual problems as far as Canvas and the access to that right now, but please put that into the chat box if you have not gotten your Canvas access yet. You might have an invitation pending there that you might want to check. But what I will do is after this session, follow up with anybody that says they haven't accessed it, and we'll figure it out. But for this morning, you'll be just fine because I will be sharing the links that you need. You'll have everything you need for the work we're doing today. Just getting everybody entered in, and we'll start together in just a couple of minutes. Let me scoot that over so you can see the prompt for the chat box there. Thank you. Thanks for putting in your info. I'm seeing it coming in. I'm going to give us just a couple of minutes. Welcome if you're just joining. Please enter into the chat box. This is our sign in. This is going to help us see who all participated today. Plus it's giving me some information that I need as well as I'm planning our sessions. And I'll start with you guys in just a couple of minutes. Just want to give everybody time to get in and get your responses into the chat box. Oops. So in the chat box, everyone, you should just have received the PowerPoint file from Robbie Eagle. Maybe not a student you recognize, but he's my son. And I've also logged in under his name right here next to me so that I can kind of be following what you all are seeing as I'm sharing my own screen. And so that file is what you all need to access to, you can follow along with it. But for the most part, I'm just going to ask that you just watch the screen, and, I'm sharing my screen, and we'll be able to, you'll be able to see the presentation here, but yet you have the PowerPoint if you need to, and you'll see a little bit later on, there are some links that you'll use the PowerPoint to access that. But really, I'm encouraging you just to follow along with me for this morning, and, view it as I'm sharing my screen, and then you'll have access to it to go back. And so let me get us all going today. Hopefully by now, time to enter your information into the chat box. I just want to make sure that I do know whether or not you've gotten your access to Canvas if you're able to. If you don't get access to Canvas, you'll have another way of getting the resources through a Google Drive link. So please tell me all of that in the chat box along with the other information I'm requesting. And that's just going to help me to follow up with you and make sure that you're on track and that you have everything you need. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning. Of course, I want to start with a welcome and a thank you to everybody for joining us. We have quite a few participants. I'm so glad you all are coming in this morning and spending a little time devoting to really thinking about what is this Science of Teaching reading exam, and starting to spend some time preparing, which is critical. So I want to just start out with a quick introduction. I'm Dr. Rodriguez. I know many of you, and I'm so glad that you're joining me again, because you already see me quite a bit through our classes, and whether it's this semester or previous semesters. But I just want to say thank you to whether current, former students, or upcoming students. Thank you all for joining and welcome. And I'm super excited about sharing this series of sessions with you and really pulling together to make this something that's going to be manageable for you and that we will all work through together to have success with. So let me see, before I jump into the content here, I want to make sure that I, just make sure that just some overview things before we start, because there are so many of us. For today, I'm going to be mostly leading the session. And so you're going to be participating at different points, but really not having time to jump in and share responses or discuss, as we will in upcoming sessions. So I'm saying that just because, with so many participating, it makes it hard to stop at many different points and, respond to questions and things. So what I want to ask you to do is, if as I'm talking or sharing, you have a pressing question or something that you want to address, put it into the chat box. And then other participants, if you know the response or you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts, you respond to that question. And as we finish up, I will review everything that was written there, and I'll send, messages as needed to, to clarify or to respond to questions that you have. And I think that'll just help to keep us on track as far as what the content that I want to get in to get everything done this morning, but still I want to address anything that comes up for you as we're working. So with that kind of housekeeping things done, I'm going to go ahead and jump into getting started for this morning. I'm going to start out with a couple of, I'm going to start out with a little pep talk, because I know that that might be needed for some of you at this point when you think about these exams that you're needing to pass, whether you are early in your program or later in your program. There's really pros and cons to both. If you're early on, congratulations. It's awesome that you're in to get this support early on, and really it will guide a lot of what you're doing throughout your program. And I commend you for that. That's awesome to start out with this thought in mind. However, what makes it a little more challenging for you all is that you will still be getting some of the content that you need to fully be prepared for the exam as you move forward in your reading classes. And so with that in mind, you're kind of a step ahead, which is great. It's always great to be ahead. But just knowing that, okay, some of this is just brand new information to me. I'm a little bit nervous about that because it seems like a lot that I haven't heard or know yet. But I want you to feel comfortable recognizing that you're starting to hear about it now, but you'll be engaging a lot more with the information as you move forward in your courses and in our program. Now, if you're later in the program, maybe what you say is not a positive piece to it is that you feel more pressured and that you really want to get these exams done and taken care of as you move into student teaching or already student teaching or maybe already graduated. And so with that in mind, you feel that pressure of, I need to hurry and be prepared. But at the same time, the positive piece of it is that you're at the other end of the program. And so that makes it where you know some of this content. This is not brand new information. And so what we're doing and what you should get out of these series is a affirmation that you are prepared, more prepared than you might think, but at the same time recognizing you need a review and you might need to pick up your timeline to really get in what you need to in the time that you have left. So wherever you are in the program, whatever your purpose is for joining in today, I'm just starting out by encouraging you to stay positive, keep this great attitude that I am certain that you all have at this point because you are sitting at your computer listening to me talk to you on a Friday morning instead of doing many other that I know that you could be doing and that are probably pressing for you to do. So already have started out in a positive way, and I just encourage you to stay that way as we move forward. So now a little funny as I get a little from the pep talk into a little tough love. So let's watch this, which hopefully is familiar to a few of you.
God, help me. Help me, Rod. Help me. Help you. Help me. Help you. Help me. Help you.
Okay, guys, so that's from this awesome movie called Jerry Maguire, but it might be before some of your time, one of my favorites. And the point of that little clip there, guys, is just this, like I said, a little tough love to recognize that we both need to do our parts in order to feel the preparation that we need to feel on both ends as you move forward with any exam. This applies to all the content areas. But my focus is the English Language Arts reading, EC through 6, 4 through 8, and of Science of Teaching reading. And so this little funny clip is really a way of saying, you know, I have fully committed to doing my part to preparing you and for upping the support that you have had previously, because I recognize that there is this anxiety around this new exam. And so what I need from you is to fully commit as well in terms of, okay, we've got a new challenge. We have something that we might not have been expecting as you entered the program, but it's fully manageable, and between us working together and helping one another, we'll be successful with that. But just with most things, you will only get out of it what you put into it. And so you can trust me whenever I'm telling you that I'm putting everything into preparing and, you know, gathering resources and really just thinking about it nonstop about ways that I can integrate these resources in more through our courses and through these sessions. So I feel I'm doing my part and I will continue to. And I know that if you do yours, then we're gonna have just grand success as we move forward with these exams. So just a reminder, and like I said, you have this PowerPoint, it will be posted later, so maybe we'll have to get back to it again as a reminder that, you know, we're both committing here. So just starting out here is a good time to make that commitment. Anyway, you guys have to watch the movie if you haven't yet. Okay, so next If you have access to the Canvas course, and again, if you don't, then you'll be getting it or or our Google Drive access or both. Then you see this is the home page, the home picture, because, you know, this is really what it all boils down to. You know, the attitude, the commitment that you have, but really it's nuts and bolts of what do I need to get done and what am I going to do to accomplish that? And so, you know, to really think about, we have this massive goal of the certification exams. You have different ones depending on your certification area. For, again, our goal here between our group is the science of teaching reading and that ELAR portion. And so I feel like we've already set that goal. You've already set the goal. You've made a plan about how you're going to engage and study. And because you're here. So that's part of your plan, is to be here. And hopefully along with that is the idea of, you know, besides the series that I'm joining in, whether it be in the live sessions or the recorded sessions, I'll commit to whatever amount of time, whatever day of the week to study the material independently. So that will help me be more prepared and have my own independent time. So whatever your plan is, it's good to have that really written down. It helps me to see it actually written down, timelined out on a calendar when you will do what. And you already know, you know, your Friday mornings might be the commitment to this series of sessions over the next several weeks. And so I'd say we're right about here in our step, because it's time to get to work and really start digging in when it comes to content and understanding the expectations and standards around the language arts reading exams. And then we'll continue up that step, guys, as we move forward, and we're in week 3. And a lot of you are saying, maybe I don't want to join this week, but we're going to stick to it. And you're going to see me doing different things to keep you engaged and involved and motivated, and just recognizing that it's going to be manageable until we get to that final step and reach that goal. And hopefully by that time, we'll be able to be together in one way or another to celebrate reaching goals and celebrate one another as you complete these exams that I know you're going to do. So like I said, we're back here on number 3, get to work. And so that's what we're going to do. So my pep talk is over and I'm ready to move forward with the content. So let me show you our plan for today. The first bit of our session today is going to revolve around just an overview and to help you really understand how the science of teaching reading, you know, works in alignment with what you had already been preparing for in the English language arts reading strand of the EC or EC through 8 exam. I'm sorry, 4 through 8 exams that you are doing depending on your certification area. So I want to show you how those competencies look now. So doing some comparison, show you how there's overlap between the expectations among both the exams, get into some information about test details, just like I said, overview information before we get into actual content. And as we wrap up this initial part, this overview part, you'll see that you have access to resources and different things, and we'll talk about that as we get to that part. So for now, let me go ahead and jump in by showing you this comparison of what the competencies looked like previously and how they have now been updated. And I'm not talking about the science of teaching reading competencies here, guys. I'm talking about the ELAR competencies back from the EC through 6 and 4 through 8 cert exams. So you used to take the 291 EC through 6 exam, and now that will be the 391. It has been redone. There's some changes that have been made to that, specifically in the ELAR part, because the science of teaching reading test was added. And so this should be oh, good. You know, when now you realize, like, okay, good. So they're not expecting me to know everything I already needed to know before, plus a whole lot of new information for the Science of Teaching Reading exam. What we're looking at on this slide is showing you previously you had 13 competencies in that EC through 6 exam, and now updated in the new 391 exam that you'll be taking for EC through 6, there are 10 competencies. And really the ones that have been pulled out are these 3 here, which let me do my little pointer that I was practicing. These 3 here are not now removed, and that will make more sense as to why when we look at the Science of Teaching Reading competencies. So hopefully this is all starting to fit together as to the way that they're doing this exam and the way that it's been pulled apart for you. And so if you see previously, competency 1 was oral language, it still is. And then all that happened is they removed these 3 competencies and everything else got scooted up. And so that means that now there's just 10 competencies for that exam instead of 13. And so you can guess what happened to those 3 competencies as we move forward in a minute talking about the Science of Teaching Reading. So now just to bring in the 4 through 8, we have a smaller group of 4 through 8 students, but I know there are some of you here today. And so these resources are for you as well. I want to show you that when you're looking at the EC through 6 competencies that that group is responsible for, and you're a 4 through 8 person, and sometimes some of you might say, man, I don't feel like I'm getting as much towards the upper grades as I need to. I don't feel like things are as specific to the upper grades as they need to be for my certification area. Well, this is a good way to recognize, like, guess what? A lot of the standards and expectations are very similar, if not exactly the same. And so that helps you to, again, recognize, like, okay, that's why it's important that I am engaging in this work around the early literacy development and really seeing what students do early on, not only for this exam, but even more now because you're also responsible for the Science of Teaching Reading exam. So this helps you to recognize, like, the resources that I'm providing for EC through 6, even though I do have some specific to 4 through 8, I want you to, make sure you're accessing those resources as well if you're a 4 through 8 person, because there's a lot of carryover there of what you need. Okay, so here is where we're looking at. This is what the ELAR competencies looked like before. And here are the competencies for the new Science of Teaching Reading exam that you will be taking. So now you see, like I just said, we pulled out these ones for the new ELAR part of the test. But now you can see, okay, phonological and phonemic awareness are now in the Science of Teaching Reading. Okay, alphabetic principles is now here under print concepts and alphabet knowledge. Literacy development can really fall under up here at foundations of science and teaching reading, because that's really what you're looking at when we're talking about foundations, is that development. So, okay, they took them out of here and basically moved them into here and expanded on them, because that's what we're going to be looking at and what we will notice the more that we get into looking at the new competencies for the Science of Teaching Reading. Just as it states in its name, this test is focused on the science around teaching of reading, which means that it really has to do with the way students develop the early processes that take place in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And so with that in mind, you see that the competencies for Science of Teaching Reading are very focused on early childhood through 2nd grade through 3rd grade at the most. And so it's really getting in depth around these different areas, the phonological awareness and the comprehension, and how that comprehension looks in different types of texts. And so it really helps you to see, okay, this is how I need to break it down. When I'm thinking of science of teaching reading and the studying I'm doing for that, it really with those early foundational, early childhood through third grade kind of behaviors and skills that we need to learn about and study. And now when we're looking at ELAR, the way that they've revised them, and you will see that on the ELAR session when we look closer at those competencies, is that they've revised them to now, instead of saying that you must know these things from early childhood through 6th grade or 8th grade, now it says the competency statement says from 4th through 8th grade. So they have revised those because they're recognizing we don't want there to be overlap. We want to pull it apart and make each test, stand on its own, rather than, that you need to kind of double up and know things for both, which you will see some overlap, and we're about to talk about that. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that's helping you to get a better orientation to how and why this new test was developed. And I do want to remind you, if you feel like, oh gosh, that's a lot, she's talking so fast, that I am recording this session. It will be available afterwards. If you want to go through and review, put a question in the chat box. I'll go back and clarify things for you if needed. But I am just moving forward and talking through this content, especially this overview, so that we can get everything done that I'm hoping to this morning. So here's the overlap I was just talking about. When I look closely, and I have spread them all out, all of the competencies with my highlighter and Post-it notes, and said, where are there overlaps among what I'm seeing in these two competencies? And so I'll point out real quick, this is where you might go into your PowerPoint and click on your this link, so that it will take you over to the actual document so that you can see it a little better. But really, I'm not going to read you each of these. It's again for your resource to review later. And if you're in my courses right now, we'll be looking at this through our classes as well. But here again, the idea is to show you, although there is some specific information in both of the exams that are going to be different, studying for one of them is also helping you to study for the other one, because you're seeing that in some of the competency areas, for example, in the science of teaching reading, we have the competency of foundations of reading assessment. And in the ELAR exam, there's the assessment of developing literacy competency. So if you're looking at that document where you can actually see it and read it, you see a lot of overlap. And that helps to say, again, okay, good. I'm seeing overlap in the things that I'm studying, and it's going to help me in both of those exams. And so that's why some of the resources that I'm posting in both places, in both the STR and the ELAR folder, because it's going to be helpful in both areas. And I hope that you see the overlap. I hope that you see, I've already studied this, I've already heard about that. And then it makes you say, like, okay, good. Another thing I can check off and say that I'm comfortable with, and that goes for both exams. So see, just keeping a positive attitude and seeing that you're already getting there more than maybe that you thought. So more overlap here. Let me show you how previously, and we've talked about this in my classes before, like that ELAR part is a huge part of the exam. It still is a huge part of the exam, but now, because they previously in the 291 exam, it was called ELAR in the science of teaching reading. That was the name of that component of that section of the test. And at that time, it took up 28% of the test. There were 75 total items, questions related to this area, and you had 1 hour and 45 minutes to complete it. Now, when you take the EC through 6 exam, in the updated as of January 2021, the English language arts reading part will be 1 hour and 10 minutes. So now it's 21.5% of the test, and you will have 45 questions rather than the 75. And and so less time, less questions, a little bit less percentage, but still I'll point out the largest percentage of all of the areas. So still, recognizing like that's a big area. Actually, along with science, it also has 45 questions. Important that you're recognizing, we need to study both of these sections, but seeing, okay, if I was preparing previously for the EC through 6, I've already been preparing for the science of teaching well, because there is that overlap, and they have now pulled it apart. So your ELAR part looks a little bit less than it did before. And your 4 through 8, guys, is the same. So previously it was 100 questions, it still is. The 4 through 8 competencies did not change that much because they were already focused on 4 through 8. And now they're just bringing in more with the science of teaching reading, where you're going to be needing to respond to what happens before grades 4 through 8 in that early childhood through grades 3. So now when we know what the ELAR part of the EC through 6 exam will look like, what the 4 through 8 will look like. And when you're talking about the STR exam, so now you're gonna have 5 hours for this one with 90 questions, and it is a computer test. And this exam, guys, has 1 constructed response, which that's going to be the last day of our series, where we look at the way that you're going to respond to that section of the exam. And so you see, okay, well, before I had to do 75 items in 1 exam. So now it's 45 in 1 exam, or 100 if you're 4 through 8, and 90 in the other exam for the STR. So if you're 4 through 8, you kind of have a similar format for both of your exams. So again, just some overview, just giving you some idea about what these look like and how it has changed now. So again, this is overview, things that I think are going to be helpful across the board when it comes to studying. And I want to just say it at the front end before we get into our actual content with STR. It's just this idea of, does the way that you're studying, when I say you make a plan, that it's something that you have to put together that works best for you. I've said this before in different sessions in class. I can't tell you what works best when it comes to the way that you should study, the way that you should prepare, because we are all individual and we have our personal preferences. I can just encourage you to, for one, be open to trying different things, especially if you feel, gosh, I want to, feel more comfortable with the way that I'm studying. So maybe you want to bring in a different way of preparing than you have before. Whatever you're doing, whatever way you determine is your process, just make sure, you're, like we said at the very beginning, you have your plan, your scheduling, and you have this goal that we all have together for being successful on these exams. And you just have some way that you're moving towards that. Like we said, work for it and take those steps that you need to take. And I'm just saying this here at the very beginning because really all of these sessions and this preparation is a challenge for me, because I always say, maybe what I want to emphasize and what I want to talk about isn't exactly the areas that they need. And so what I'm doing is really trying to facilitate your learning, provide resources to help you move forward in your understandings. But you're not going to find me necessarily teaching during these sessions. It's more, here are some things that we need to review. Here are some ways that you might review them. Here are some resources to review them. And now let's practice all of that. And so some kind of assessment, whether it's practice questions, Kahoot quizzes, any of that. So what I feel like the sessions that I'm conducting for you are kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to you actually studying, because it's just a piece of your process. So hopefully you will find these sessions valuable, and of course, and also that they're recorded and the whatever presentations are made are available for you. But at the same time, it's probably not the only thing you're going to do. It shouldn't be the only thing you're going to do. And you'll figure out the way that works best for you. So I want to point that out at the beginning. And it might just, sometimes it's helpful just to hear from one another. You know, what have you found that works? In some of our classes over the past couple of weeks, some of you have said how you've, over these last few months, you've organized a new space for your studying, you've rearranged furniture. Sometimes being organized is the first step to really feeling comfortable and feeling like you can move forward with preparing. So whatever works. I just wanted to make some time to say that at the beginning. So you might say, where do I start when it comes to all of this content and really pulling it apart? And really, I also have the, you know, I'm aware that this is not just this section for you guys, but, you know, just a piece of what all you actually need to be successful with when it comes to certification exams. So again, the resources that I'm providing, you can use this across content areas and hopefully decide again what way it works best for you. But what I'm going to suggest is a step one. And for those of you that are in my classes this semester, you can see, you can check step one off of your list because I required this in class, where I'm asking you to actually make a physical test prep binder. And so I pulled one together because in our classes, in my classes, we're going to be using this regularly, but also through the, I'm trying to see if you can see that a little bit, little binder with my little Post-its, because I'm highlighting things and doing things throughout there that help me to find things that I need quickly. But this is a first step. And like I said, I mean, nothing that we do during these sessions can be required. I mean, it's not a class, there's not a grade attached to it. But again, it's what is your level of commitment and how much do you want to engage in these sessions, you know, and that will have an impact on what the payoff is for you. So you might say, well, I don't have to do this quite yet. Or you might say, I've already started this because I had to for her class. And so you have this done. But each of those links takes you to the different, each of those links to competencies, they take you to the overlap that I just showed you, and you also have a glossary. Does you have a question? Okay, somebody jumping in. Okay, so again, and then you might do, let me see. So what I don't have a divider necessarily, but just sheets in between with a little tab where each of my different sections are tabbed off. So you see that. And as we move forward in class and also in these study sessions, at times I might say, well, get out that binder, highlight, look in the glossary, do you see this term? If not, then put a Post-it that you need to add it in. That glossary is not all inclusive. It was just one that I found that I thought included a lot of good vocabulary that's helpful, but you might find more to add. And that's why I said add blank paper, because that's a place for notes. And then the other things you might be adding as we have the different presentations. And even this morning, I'll be showing you some visuals, some different illustrations that I think might be good study tools. You might print those off. You might print off the complete presentation and put it, you know, in the different sections behind the competencies that were covered that day. In my classes, some of you have talked about, is that okay if I get a bigger binder and make a section for every content area and kind of do the same thing? And I think that's great. If everything's in one place, that's right up my alley with the way I would have studied myself for these exams. Just where everything's together, my highlighters there, my little bag of teacher tools, pencils, pens, Post-it notes, and that folder would probably, the binder would probably be going with me most places, so that I'm never wasting time when I could be looking in and reviewing and studying and pulling that out to help me prepare. So that's a possible step one that I encourage but can't require unless you're in my classes. I can in that case. And if you're very early on in the program, for example, in 3320 or 4450, EDRE 4450 right now, it's a great time to start your binder, because as we move forward, and I'm talking about ways that we can use it, you can see that starting early on is going to be so valuable, because as you move forward, you'll be adding to it, but yet you will already have all of the content from before as well. So by the time you're at the end of your program, you'll have so much put together. It will be a very helpful tool. So what's step 2 after? How do I prepare? What do I do next? So maybe you make a binder. And then your next step, and maybe some of you have already done this, is getting that practice test done. That's like a pre-assessment. Let's see where you are, how you're doing at this point. And so you can do that through the testing center for the EC through 6 and 4 through 8 exam. And for the science of teaching reading, one of the reasons that I'm putting this series together, guys, is because there's very little as far as resources and practice test availability right now. Just real quick, if you make sure you're on mute, please. I think there's a couple of you that are not, so just so we're not overlapping on sound. So just a reminder of, so what I have here is a link to an online practice test through 240 Tutoring. Maybe some of you have already seen it. Maybe some of you have already done it. But I'm just using it as a pre-assessment. I thought it provided some good starting out, just as a good measure for where we are at this point with those competencies. So this is your first step, is to get that practice test done. You might have already done it for one of the areas, and now you do it for science of teaching reading. And I'm going to ask for the STR that you actually submit your score sheet that they give you at the end of that practice test. And that way, I'm going to store it away, again, not for any grade, not so I can judge on who's more ready and who is not. It's going to help me to have data to show this was our starting point. And at the end of 6 weeks, we'll look at it again with some post-assessment data and say, look at our growth, and we'll celebrate again. So lots of reasons to celebrate down the line. So I would suggest, over the next couple of days, sitting down, because it is a time test, and at the end, it produces a great score report that breaks down the different competencies. So that's your step 2. Before you move forward and really feel like, okay, now let me see where I engage and study. And then that's where you get those test results and you say, what am I doing great? What competency areas am I stronger in, and where do I need more work? And we'll look at an example of, how to kind of read the score sheet in our next session once you have looked at your reports. And it just helps you to prioritize your study schedule. It might help you to prioritize which sessions that you try to attend live and which sessions that you might access the recorded sessions for, because that will tell you, okay, here's the competency areas where you answered more questions right. Here's where you answered less questions right. And then you say, now I'm ready to move forward with preparation. And you're going to have access to an ELAR recorded prep session, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And of course, you already know you have access to the Science of Teaching reading sessions, either live like we are now, or recorded, which they will be accessible by that late afternoon of the day that they were presented live. And again, whatever works best for you for attending. I think the important thing is that you're accessing the resources in whatever format. But I will encourage you, especially as we move forward, we'll talk more about that. Some of our sessions will include small group work and really doing some activities together to help us practice some of the needed skills. And so obviously that's going to be most helpful if you're able to engage in those small groups live than if you just kind of watch it on your own recorded. However, I understand that that doesn't work for everybody's schedule. So, you know, whatever works best, but just the understanding that some of those will be perhaps not as valuable for you if you're accessing the recording. But hopefully either way, you'll see them as valuable, even if, you know, you don't do the small group work. It might just be a way that you end up studying on your own to access them that way. I'm a big fan of Kahoot. I'm going to keep on pulling that in at the end of our sessions because that's going to be a quick way for us to do a little assessment, a fun assessment, a quick check on the competence that we covered that day. And I also have some different Kahoot links available just for overviews and the different content in the different ELAR competency areas. So please download that if you haven't yet on your phone or tablet. And during our live sessions, usually as a wrap up towards the end of our session, we'll have some time to, you know, play a game all together. You'll get a code to put in so you can join in. And so even today at the end, we'll do that. So if you don't have it yet, and many do because we use it quite a bit in class, please make sure you have that downloaded. And again, those links are going to be available for you so that you can independently access those Kahoot games to play on your own and practice and review. And then it'll give you a little report on where you did better or need to work on when it comes to answering those questions. So, you know, again, this is nothing unfamiliar. This is how you're getting your test prep support. If you've gone through your step 1, completing the binder, step 2, taking the practice test, and now you're reviewing your test report and engaging in test prep support. For our series, as you know, I've broken down, and again, you can look closer at this in our resources link if you can't read it here. Broken it down to the different competency areas. After your test, you might find that some are more critical for you than others, or you might try to be at every single session, whatever you prefer. You see that there's the support for this area here. And then when it comes to the EC through 6 and 4 through 8, this is where you will access the materials for that. And so, like I said, you have the PowerPoint, so you should be able to already get into the link, hopefully click onto it, and it takes you over here to the EC through 6 and 4 through 8 material. And so this is where, guys, later on, I will have a recorded ELAR session that you'll find right here in place of this PowerPoint. But it's not ready quite yet, but later on you'll see that, and I'll send an announcement out when it's ready, just so you know you can access it here. And then that's within that session is where I'll talk about the resources you have here. But for right now, you see you have access to it through our through this PowerPoint. And we'll be talking more about those specific resources as we, when you get into the ELAR test prep recorded session. Because today's session is really focusing on the science of teaching reading. So for right now, I'm going to take a little pause because that's really the introductory part that I wanted to make sure and cover first. And so I'm going to stop recording there and start with looking over at our ELAR, our Science of Teaching Readings 1 and 2. I'm sorry, guys, I just need to get over here to stop recording.